So it's my pleasure to introduce this fireside chat. We're going to be discussing ESG and why it's mission critical for organisations in today's world. And our first panellist is Clare Lissaman. Morning, Clare.
Morning.
Clare is head of Oxfam Advisory Services, and this is an organisation that provides companies with advice and guidance around sustainability. Clare and her team help businesses follow ESG best practice throughout their supply chains and help them to prevent inequality and to lessen poverty. Prior to Oxfam, Clare was Director of Content and Impact for the Common Objective Platform, which is a global tech solution to promote sustainability in fashion. And our second panellist is Ben Ngobi. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning.
And Ben is Global Supplier Inclusion and Sustainability Lead at Accenture. Ben leads Accenture's Global Supplier Inclusion and Sustainability Programme, and he helps organisations embed ESG initiatives in their operations. He's also involved with several non-profit organisations in the areas of supplier inclusion and sustainability. And finally, Rohit is our third panellist. Rohit Bardaiyar is Executive Vice President at VDart, a US-based digital consulting firm. Good morning, Rohit.
Good morning.
Rohit has 23 years global sales and account management experience and a long track record of nurturing profitable client relationships, and he's also responsible for fast-paced sustainable growth. And under his leadership, VDart has also become a part of Accenture's diverse supplier development program on sustainability. So these are your panelists, and we're going to be talking about all things ESG, because, you know, in today's world, ESG initiatives are mission critical. Everybody's looking at companies not just on how they're performing on ESG, but how visible that performance is. Investors, stakeholders, customers, everybody is heavily invested in moving forward on ESG. So I thought maybe we could open with just a general question, and maybe if we just work our way across the panel from you, Ben, and if you could just tell and share some of the ESG initiatives that are happening at your own organisations.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to this panel, fireside chat. So Accenture is obviously a very large company, 720,000 people around the world, and we really believe that responsible business is really integral to the future of our planet. And to make sure we are driving towards a responsible business model, we have quite a number of targets. So in my world, I'm in supply chain, right? But supply chain drives this significant contribution to where we're going across scope 1, 2, 3, across human rights, supply inclusion, and diversity. Now, the key targets we've got a target to be net zero by 2025. We also have an SBT target, so we're aiming to be reducing our emissions overall by about 11% in absolute terms. Scope 1 and 2, I think around 65%. So that's SBT. We also have a renewable energy target, so we want to be powering our offices globally, 100% with renewable energy by next year. So that's pretty much around the environment, but we do have some additional targets around water, around waste as well. When we move to human rights, we do have some certain internal targets that we drive around how we're communicating to key suppliers on our supplier standards in particular, which have flowed down to the United Nations Global Compact principles. We do have supplier diversity targets, so this is how we drive inclusive and responsible procurement practices. And for that, we've got a target to develop 250 businesses around the world by 2023.
I see.
So broadly speaking, so we've got a whole suite of targets across ESG, and I'm glad to be in a team that helps to drive that forward for Accenture. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Claire?
thanks. So I've almost forgot our question. What are we doing around ESG?
That's right.
Your starting point. Sorry, that was so interesting. We're 80 years old this year. I'm assuming everyone's heard of Oxfam. This month, 80 years ago, a group of people got together in a room in Oxford and founded the Oxford Committee for Famine Relief to try and get food through the blockade that was stopping food getting to Greece, and people were starving in the middle of the Second World War. And they went, this isn't right. People shouldn't be starving, and that requires political action, and it requires actual action, getting food to people. And I think I don't know whether they'd be happy or really depressed that 80 years on we still exist, because there's still a need. People, from political action to inaction to actual sort of unequal distribution of food, people are still starving and dying. So I guess our mission on ESG is a little bit different, possibly from yours or of any other. There are companies in the room. But having said that, we do have and we're a global confederation. So we think about Oxfam GB here in the UK, and I'll talk about that mainly, but we're part of a global confederation now in over 90 countries. And as Oxfam GB, we do have a business. We have 600 shops in the UK with paid shop staff, with a supply chain. Most of our supply chain is donated goods, some of which does come from companies. But we also have our own Sourced by Oxfam product range, which I'm sure, hopefully you've all seen, you've all bought. Go buy. There's amazing Christmas decorations. If you want to get stuff for Christmas, really beautiful embroidered Christmas decorations, go get them. And that Sourced by Oxfam product, as you would imagine, we have a very strong framework about how we source that, how we get that onto the shelves, how we look at the environmental and social impact of what we're buying. And our mission with that, of course, is to overcome poverty through trade. And we have environmental and carbon targets, mainly around our shops and our offices. On the other side of stuff, we work on inequality, I suppose, and how we have a more equal world. Our mission is for a radically better world. So that's what we're trying to achieve. And how we bring what you might term ESG into that is how do we do it? And some of that is through our own research on business and human rights, on human rights and supply chains. Some of it is how we work on the ground in countries with communities to build better and work better. And the area of Oxfam I work for, this is an advisory service, came out of both our corporate partnerships work and our sort of campaigning and advocacy and saying businesses, you can do better and you should do better. And we've brought that together with businesses coming to us and saying, well, great, you've told us what we should be doing. Can you just help us do it? Is this right? Can you check over our policies? How do we actually do this? What do we do to implement? So that's why we now have, I'm a subsidiary company, part of OGB to deliver that. So that's a bit of a taste of what we're doing on ESG.
And Rohit, what's VDart doing around ESG?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, viewers all across the globe. Thank you, Sean, for having me here. So VDart is about a 3,700 employee company spread across 11 different countries. So we are a digital talent management and a global consulting firm. Quite obviously, we've got a pretty large global footprint. So, ever since inception, VDart has been a very socially conscious company. People have been at the core of our business. Service comes, naturally to us. It's part of our DNA. Throughout the years, we've had over 10,000 hours of just service, community service that we've done between all different locations and between our sister companies. So it was always there. But it was not until 2020 that we took ESG as our main primary focus. So now it's become the key business imperative for us. And I'd like to thank Nidra Dixon from Accenture and Ben, who's here as a mentor. They've actually taken us under their wings and gotten us exposed to this new world of ESG and how this can be a true competitive advantage for us. We did a year mentoring program with them, and as a result of that, we were not just exposed to Accenture's vision on sustainability, but Accenture also helped us create our own ESG strategy, its implementation plan, the goals that we needed to adopt as far as ESG is concerned, SDGs are concerned, So at the moment, we have adopted 5 major goals in SDG related to hunger, eliminating gender inequality, providing equal education to all, and obviously environment is a big factor, and we're happy to say that we've created a 5-year roadmap, and all thanks to this wonderful program from Accenture.
That's great. Thank you very much, Rohit. I wonder, actually, Ben, if you could maybe just share with us briefly what it is that Accenture's Diverse Supplier Development Program is. Who is it designed for, and what does it do? If you just give us a couple of headline points about that.
Yes, I'm happy to. So the Accenture Diverse Supplier Development Program, as we call it, started in 2006. And the whole idea is how we can help to accelerate the growth of small businesses. So as you know, many of them have many challenges: access to capital, cash flow, having access to consulting support, as it were, to help them grow their businesses. So the whole idea is we have 12 to 18 months, depending on the country we're in, but standard is 18 months, where we find a diverse business. They get paired up with an Accenture managing director, a senior leader, and they get exposed to, they become part of the family, and they get exposed to lots of materials to help them grow. Now, that program, obviously, I said earlier, is 250 businesses that we aim to grow by the end of next year. So I'm now looking at our new accelerated target to 2030. So that's kind of work in progress. What's the scale? Who do I need to partner with? Because as we look at the overall 2030 journey around net zero, we need to be doing even more.
Right, and roughly how many companies are involved in this scheme?
Last year, we graduated 196 businesses, and you'll be able to read up on the latest numbers, but I'll let you know that we are on track to meet that target.
Yeah.
So,
great.
Yes, 196 businesses, from South
including
Africa.
VDOT.
Yes, including VDOT.
And so Claire, I'd like to move on to, the ESG problems in supply chain, or challenges, problems, whichever way you want to look at it. At tier 1 level, tier 2, things are far more visible. The companies are bigger. But when you reach the shadowy recesses of the supply chain, as you get nearer the raw materials, and there's less transparency, maybe less publicity around what's happening there, how can companies who may unwittingly even be greenwashing without even knowing it, how do they get a handle on this situation and drive ESG compliance all the way right down through the supply chain?
So if you start at it, I think, from that perspective, it can be tricky. I mean, how do you get transparency? And that's a really good area for companies to focus on. And, if you don't know where your products are actually coming from, then you've got a business risk anyway. You've potentially got a supply risk. You've got all sorts of other things. So it's not a bad idea. Obviously, certain sectors have very complex, fragmented supply chains. I came from textiles, and once you get cotton from various fields into a spinning mill, where did they come from? But someone always does know. There's always some way of doing it. I think perhaps a different way of approaching it from us is actually, two things. One, is it really companies' jobs to do that? If we had good governments with good regulation and good trade unions that can, I'm talking the social here at least, the workers and farmers and producers can stand up for their own rights, then you just know that's happening. Right? So you wouldn't need to do it as a company. So maybe, slightly controversially here, maybe the best thing you could do as a company is to really campaign for good regulation and good trade unions, because that will actually make your life much easier in your extended tiers. The other way around, of course, is that people themselves know what their issues are and what their challenges are. And if you can find ways, trade unions are the obvious one, but where there are groups and organisations that are representing workers, that are bringing producers together or farmers together and hear from them, that's another. So there's different ways of tackling it, rather than feeling I have to go down my supply chain to find out exactly which bamboo farm in the southwest of China that bamboo came from that went into the bamboo viscose that I'm now buying in Turkey. that I think is quite a challenging journey. But if we go, actually, we know this is coming from this kind of sector, this kind of place, we can work collectively to try and make change. The other thing I would say is, if we're talking about global supply chains, if we had good business organisations in those countries that, like you guys, are now going, I have to embrace ESG. You know, if the spinning mill I keep talking about spinning in India. That's obviously in my head at the moment. If the Spinning Mill Owners Association of India said, we want to do this properly, trust us, we'll make it work. You know, we'll talk with you, we'll talk with NGOs, we'll try and get this all working properly and pay decent wages, then that solves some of your problems as well. So collective, collaborative action.
So I'll pick up on you mentioned trade unions there. I mean, we sort of, you may or may not know the story, you know, the situation at Amazon where they, you know, the workers there were struggling to gain trade union representation. Do you see trade unionism as being part of the social component of ESG and people's right to be able to join a trade union if they wish to?
Are you asking me? Or
well, I'm asking that panel. Well,
Ben,
maybe?
Absolutely, we would, and that's part of your ILO core conventions that every country has signed up to.
Does Accenture have a position on that?
I was just going to read that per supplier standards. There is a clause in our supplier standards. You know, we neither object or disagree. So I think it's up to the businesses.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, there seems to be some grey areas maybe in ESG where there's, I mean, if a company wanted guidance on that, where would they go to, and who would give it to them? Who would give them clarity on an issue like that?
I mean, we've got the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. That's a pretty good starting point for companies to look at, and the various initiatives that have come beyond that. OECD guidelines around it are all looking at sort of frameworks, international law, and they've been fed into and led into by representatives of workers, farmers, and others. Obviously, on a day-to-day basis for a business, there are many advisory services you can come and talk to, us being one of them, you being one of them, you being one of them, in fact. Come and talk to all of us. But yeah, there are some now good international frameworks. The upcoming potential mandatory human rights due diligence at the EU level has a lot of detail on that. Yeah.
So maybe I could put one to Ben and Rohit here. You know, but everybody has set their ESG goals, net zero goals, working towards, I guess, 2030 in the first instance, and ultimately 2050. Where are you on your roadmaps? Or your customers, where are they on their roadmaps, Ben? And where is VDart on its roadmap towards achieving the goals on that front? Maybe Ben, if you start us off here.
Yeah. I think, broadly speaking, I was actually just having a conversation with Clare earlier. You know, every other year we run a big UNGC report. It's kind of what is it that companies are doing to deliver change? And the last one we did in 2030, and for that one, really, the key finding was, after the interviews of about 1,000 CEOs, they all believe that sustainability is fundamental. It's fundamental for driving agility, fundamental for innovation, and so on. And actually, a lot of the CEOs, a lot of the businesses are on target. I believe some 200 businesses already had set SBT targets at the 1.5 pathway. But generally, most businesses believe this is the right thing to do. It's just different journeys they are at, and the role of technology that will play. You know, from our supply chain perspective, we set a target to encourage some 90% of our key suppliers to disclose both their targets and the initiatives to reduce environmental impact. And actually, when you look at last year's disclosures, 58% of businesses were setting targets within the group of companies that we track. That is an internal goal. Okay. Obviously, we will have suppliers that are also clients, but that is a very key fundamental metric to look at how our suppliers are progressing towards their own targets.
Okay, so they're all moving at slightly different paces.
They're moving at slightly different pace, and really the challenge is going to be around engaging and helping those who might not be able to move forward, because some of the businesses are small. But they're material to us, so we need to think about how we can help them.
And our companies, I'll get to you in a second, Rohit, I promise. But I just one question around that. Are there any sectors in particular that are high performing or low performing when it comes to the pace of ESG change, sustainability change?
That's a good question.
I can think of two. Tobacco industry. The defense industry.
Are they going slow or quick?
Very slow.
Right.
And investors don't like them too much, especially as far as the ESG standards are concerned. But just to answer your question on what our clients doing and what VDart is doing. So our clients, majority of them have set 2030 as their target. That's after the Paris Agreement. I mean, the idea is to be at least 2% under, pre-industrial standards. So a lot, about 200 companies, like Ben said, have already committed to, being net neutral by 2030. In the US, we already see a lot of companies taking a lead. Companies like UPS, FedEx, Chevron, they've already made, significant commitments and investments in meeting those criteria. But I would say 2040 seems more like a realistic target for a company like VDart, who's I would say phase one of their sustainability roadmap. I would say probably 2040 seems more like possible. But yeah, under 10% is what we want to do in terms of our GHG emissions. And in fact, we've had our own criteria for waste reduction as well as for, moving all of our energy usage to renewable energy. At least 50% of our facilities across the globe are going to be using renewable energy by 2025.
Wow.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Rohit. So I was just wondering if you were dealing with a company who is struggling to either get their ESG initiatives off the ground or to formulate a coherent approach to ESG, what would be your advice to help them get moving on that? Maybe if we just work across the panel from you, Ben.
Yes, my advice is you do need to get senior leadership involvement. And if you're within our ecosystem of suppliers, do reach out to me because I'm invested to make sure that you are working towards that journey to reduce your impact. Because the way we calculate GHG kind of emissions, your scope 1 and 2 emissions are mine, with certain content within scope 3. So actually, we are invested in making sure that we are driving towards a net zero pathway. So either you reach out to me if you're within that ecosystem, or you're within some of the non-profits that we work with, VDart and ourselves, and a few companies are members of, say, MSD UK, Minority Supplier Development UK, members of NMSDC in the US. So these are big forums where we have our equally invested corporate partners who are keen to drive towards that. So key action is get your leaders involved and also reach out to us, because if I can't help you, I'll put you in touch with somebody who can.
And Claire, what would be your advice?
Yeah, well, seconded get the senior leaders, your board, your trustees, whoever it is, on it. I think if you're struggling to develop an ESG strategy, the advice would be different depending on what it is you're struggling with. If it's knowing what to do, it's one thing. If it's knowing resistance within the organisation, something else. I think key things to have in how you develop a strategy and where it sits, that it has to sit and be embedded within the whole organisation and not just be, we do business and we do ESG over here, and how you get that properly, as part of it. And it's really heartening to hear what you were saying, Rohit, about how your business has taken it on and shifted and changed. And I think, 15 years ago, we'd be having a very different conversation here now. From our side, on the social side, I think it's don't replicate failure, but also look at where success is. So don't try and just take compliance-based approaches. And we would call them rights holders. It's very NGO language, but the people who are impacted by the work you do, get them involved in the development of your strategy as much as possible. And unsurprisingly, we're also here to help with that. So
thank you, Claire.
Come talk to us.
Yeah. My advice to companies is that you're not too small.
Agreed.
And no company is too small to adopt ESG. In fact, ESG begins from home. That's where it begins. And, if you look at how the industry is shaping, how the world around us is shaping, a recent, Gartner survey said that for the first time, ESG ranked number 8 in the list of a CEO's priorities. And I don't think it's too far that it's probably going to hit #1 status. In order for you, small businesses, to actually do business with these companies, ESG has to be in your DNA. I mean, it has to be in your vision statement. It has to show up in your vision. And more often than not, the problem with large and small companies, as far as ESG adoption is concerned, is that they don't include ESG as part of their decision-making process. Every decision-making process, be it as simple as a hire, on your board, or a whistleblower program, or your labor, labor standards, or your supplier diversity and inclusion program. You can make a change in just about all of these areas. So, it fundamentally has to come from within, and you have to include ESG as part of your, everyday decision making.
Can I? We both want to pick up on that. You go.
Super quickly, on that decision-making process.
Yeah.
We are allocating 20% scoring for RFPs for ESG.
Oh, wow.
Okay? So that is material. If you are bidding for work, coming to Accenture to bid for work, we expect you to be performing at that level, right? So the reason I was implying get your leaders involved, it's because, as you say, no business is too big or too small, and all our ecosystem partners are on the same path, right? If it's not 15%, maybe it's 10 or whatever it is. But this is material for you winning or not winning business.
Interesting. I was going to say, picking up on the you're never too small, I remember being at a conference around a whole environmental and social sustainability. There was a big Sri Lankan manufacturer, it was a manufacturers conference, telling all the great things they were doing, fantastic stuff they were working on. And someone in the audience went, this is all great, but I run a relatively small factory, it's just me. I'm the CEO, I'm the managing director, and then we make stuff. How am I supposed to be doing all of these great programs that you're doing? Which I thought was interesting. But for me, when I've worked previously as a consultant with businesses, but even now, we go, you're probably doing a lot, you're just not putting it in the language of this stuff. So let's take a look. True. Let's understand what you're doing. How would you reframe that in now this language of ESG or ethical compliance or guiding principles or whatever, mandatory human rights due diligence, whatever language you want to overlay it. And actually, often I worked a lot with SMEs, smaller businesses that really know their business, know their staff, can get stuff done in a very different way than larger organisations, and can really be quite empowering, can be quite impactful, but just don't know the language of it. So.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, panel. We do have a few minutes left.
It's a very keen person.
So, Nalita, the gentleman over here. If you could just give us your name and who you work for. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. My name's Sagar. My company's Holistic Economy. You can assume from the words, for me, it's going beyond circular economy. My question is ESG's, environmental, social, governance. My roots are India and also my family, Africa. When I look back at the biggest mining states in India, and I look at all the raw resources, there's no environmental governance, social governance. There's abuse of the people, abuse of the land. When I look at it deeper, there's a little bit of coal being mined, but most of the resources being mined, whether women are being abused sexually or whatever else it is lithium, cobalt, bauxite. And what I find really disturbing and shocking and sad is that everyone's completely 110% glossing over the renewables like they're God's gift to mankind, but they're completely lambasting fossil fuels, but not looking at the fact that you cut out fossil fuels. Firstly, how are you going to make your renewables? How are you going to dig up the minerals? How are you going to dig up the resources? And secondly, all this clean tech is all clean. There's no black blood, no African blood, no Indian blood, no Chinese. Where's the conversations from the companies, big and small, talking about the fact that these renewables are they're ridden with environmental slave rights abuses of the people in the global south.
That's a very good point. Can I just stop you there, because we are running out of time.
Yeah, but this is really important.
You could have a whole conference around that point alone, I
no,
suspect.
but we've got to attend to it.
But panel, any thoughts?
Well, yeah. See, this is the problem. ESG reporting, for instance, that itself is fairly new, just about 5 years old. The problem with majority of the companies is that either they would be strong on environment and be loose on social and governance, like you said. There would probably be several violations of human rights and slavery practices as well. And that is probably the concern. I mean, this is why ESG has actually taken precedence now, because a company or countries cannot just look at one aspect and ignore the other. And we've seen instances where, companies would be very ESG compliant company, but at the same time, you've seen how many, cybersecurity attacks occurred, and they've negotiated massive ransomware with unethical hackers across different countries, right?
Thank you for that, Rohit. We are running out of time. So Claire and Ben, if you want to pick up on that.
Yeah, just a quick point. Obviously, we are on a journey. All of us are on a journey, so we are learning a lot through this journey. But what we've done internally is create a renewable buying kind of principles of how we classify what the type of renewables that we are buying. So, and remember, and I know as part of those principles, we're covering key things around biodiversity and so on.
But I think beyond that, you touched on something really critical I jumped in on you then. That's really bad of me, isn't it? Oxfam, as you'd imagine, we are going through a long process of how we decolonize, become anti-racist, become feminist in our behavior, in our actions, whether it's humanitarian aid or the human rights work we're doing. And I think what you're touching on there is critical, because it's not just about, to your earlier question, how do we really understand have transparency all the way down our supply chain? It's about the approach and the attitude and the mindset we're taking around moving from an extractive kind of idea. I don't mean literally extractives. I mean an extractive idea of taking in supply chains from people somewhere and using it somewhere else. And how do you do that kind of supply chain management work in a way that is anti-racist, that is decolonized, that is feminist in how we think about our behavior in how we do business, and whether that's mining or manufacturing. Let's have a conference about it, because for us, it's absolutely, where Oxfam is standing now, it's absolutely critical to our work across all our work. So,
thank you very much, panel. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Rohit. Ladies and gentlemen, your panel.
Oh, sorry, but all those hands with questions. Sorry.
We were just getting started.